Where do you find the determination and discipline to eat every day? You probably find it somewhere deeper than yourself. Okay. Yes.
Could you describe the first few weeks, the first few months that you started doing sadhana?
Can I describe the first few weeks of doing sadhana?
Yeah, and how you felt going through the whole process.
Going through the whole thing. Ooh. Well, for the first, of course we were a little, this is 1968, so the sadhana was rather ragged by comparison to today's, how we do things today. But there we go. We were a small group, and the devotees were kind to me, actually. They were encouraging and instructive when I needed some instruction. And that really made it easier to do and sort of pleasing to do. And also, I think I was looking forward to finding out what I was going to get from doing it. You know, what do you find? I had some faith in the chanting. So what am I going to get by chanting? What kind of progress can I make? And I was looking forward to reading the books and hearing the philosophy, so it was new and encouraging. I found chanting 16 rounds a bit challenging because we're not used to that. In India, you know, people can sit and chant for hours, just sit and meditate on the sound. And it's not something I've never found anywhere in my background. Not something I've done. So I find it difficult to concentrate, and my mind would wander here and there. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram. And I find that hard. How do you stick to that? And one of my god sisters, Govinda Dasi, some of you may know her name, was an early disciple of Srila Prabhupada. She joined before I had. I mentioned it to her, and she mentioned that Prabhupada would chant a little sing-songy, not monotone. But Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram. No prescribed tune, but a little sing-songy. That made things so much easier for me. Thank you, good Dasi. Yes.
Kindly share your views on past karma. Kindly share your views on past karma. Maybe
My views on past karma?
Past karma and how it affects our decisions, just like
how it affects our decisions. Well, my first view about past karma is we're stuck with it. Whatever we've done, we've done. And it does affect where we are now. We've taken birth in a particular place with a particular body and a particular mind on account of our past activities. That's cause and effect. And if you do something, you'll have a result. You put your hand in the fire, you get burned. You eat a nourishing meal, you get strength. Whatever you do, there'll be a result. And that carries over from lifetime to lifetime. And so we have a whole background of past karma, which affects how we're situated and what we do. Perhaps you've heard there are three modes or qualities of material nature, ignorance, passion, and goodness, and they mix up like colors in different proportions. And so if we're in ignorance, we'll act one way. If we're in goodness, if you're in goodness, maybe you might spend the evening discussing philosophy or appreciating works of fine art or something like that. If you're in the mode of ignorance, you might be one of the members of the crowd we just passed through on the way here, standing outside the pub with beer in both hands. So why is one person standing outside the pub and another person standing outside the art museum? It's on account of past karma and the qualities that we've picked up because of that. But by devotional service, by bhakti, and by chanting Hare Krishna, we can come to the transcendental platform, which is above past karma. So that's the best decision.
Like, can we, just like there are some negative past karmas also, can we remove them also through?
Karmani nirdhati kintu cha bhakti bhana. If we try to remove them one by one by some meditative process or some yogic process, it will be very difficult. By some psychoanalytic process, whatever process, it will be very difficult. But in the Brahma Samhita, it's said, Karmani nirdhati kintu cha bhakti bhana, that by devotional service, one can burn up all the way to the roots whatever past karma one has accumulated. Automatically, just by serving Krishna, one gets free from past karma. Yes.
I just wanted to thank you for personally inspiring me. I met you at Studio 108 last year, and I bought your book then. And since then, like after reading it, it's really changed my life. My question is with regards to the book. In the book Kohelet.
Okay, we have to say that loud. You read my book and it changed my life. Okay, yes.
In the book, Kohelet, he consciously goes through an experience. He wants to experiment with like material pleasures like wine and women and all that. And he goes into it with that intention of seeing what it's like, and he comes out of it quite distraught that it's chasing after wind. My question is, in the Bhagavatam, it talks a lot about the difference between learning through hearing and learning through experience. If someone personally finds learning through experience more helpful in their own spiritual life, why does it talk about Shravanam or hearing as a better process?
Okay, repeating the question. My book is a commentary on the biblical book of Ecclesiastes, which is also known as Kohelet, and the speaker of the book is also known as Kohelet. In the beginning of the book, Kohelet tells of two experiments he performed. And one was he was looking for the meaning of life. And one experiment was to try pleasure and just go with whatever his heart told him he might want to enjoy, but to watch himself do it, to see what the outcome would be. And he found that it was useless. It was a chasing after wind. There was nothing in it. And then he tried knowledge. Let me be wise. And he became wiser than anyone else before him. But then he found that also was meaningless and chasing after wind. So after these two experiments and having these experiences, he's writing further. And the question is that we hear that there are different ways of learning. One is by experience, and another is by hearing. And we teach that learning by hearing is better. So why is that? Or what if someone finds experience more persuasive or more deeply affecting than hearing? The advantage of hearing is that it can save us a lot of trouble. It may not be as graphic, but it can save us a lot of trouble. If someone tells a child that putting his finger in the fan isn't a good idea because he could hurt himself, and he just goes with that, he saves himself a lot of trouble. If he doesn't believe it or doesn't accept it and puts his hand in the fan, he'll have a more graphic experience of the thing. But he does so by undergoing needless pain. Yeah, I'm just trying to think if also, there's so much that we could experience. Oh, try this, try this, try this, try this. There's no end to it. By hearing, we can get the summary, then none of it works, so forget it. And save ourselves lifetimes of needless, painful experimentation. And your follow-up.
So, in one of the verses, I think...
Maybe still move up a little more, because as expected, some more people came. Welcome to the more people who came. Here, get dangerously close. Let's see now. Okay.
So, in one of the verses, King Daksha, he says that when one has experienced it so much, they become so sick of it that it kind of, I'm paraphrasing, it builds up a conviction that they don't want to do that again.
Yeah.
But surely by listening, if your curiosity hasn't been extinguished completely, would it be recommended to experience it then, if by listening it hasn't been?
There's a section in the fourth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam where a little backstory, Narad Muni makes the many sons of King Daksha devotees. They give up their materialistic life. They decide to skip the worldly life and they become renounced. And Daksha becomes furious at this and angry at Narad Muni. And one of his arguments is that you've just persuaded them to be superficially renounced with your arguments. But it's much better if one goes through life and experiences everything, and then automatically he'll become renounced because he'll have experience. So isn't that better? Yeah.
It's more that if someone can't extinguish that.
And if you can't extinguish the urge to find out, isn't it better to go through it? Well, first of all, whether it's better or worse, that's what he's going to do. If I can't reach a conclusion by hearing, then I'll do it like the child, if he doesn't hear and understand, then he's going to say, well, let me do it. And whether it's a better path or a worse path, that's what's going to happen to him. Now, the answer to Daksha's argument, Daksha says it's better if one has experience, then one automatically becomes detached. One sees that it doesn't work, that it's meaningless, and he becomes detached. The problem with that is it ain't so. We see so many people, they go through so much trouble, so much unhappiness, so much grief, so much angst, and they just stick with it. They do the same thing again and again. It didn't work the first time, but they think maybe this time it'll work. They lost all their money in betting on the horses, and then they get a little more money and go out and bet on the horses again. They, in so many ways, they don't learn. They have the experience, but it doesn't sink in. It doesn't click.
But what if it does sink in?
If it does sink in, great, then you learned by experience. At least you learned. You learned, they say, learn the hard way. So, all right, he learned the hard way, at least he learned. And that's really what happens to us. In one sense, we don't have a shortage of experience. Every one of us has been through lifetimes and lifetimes and lifetimes and lifetimes of experience in this species and that species, in this kind of human life and that kind of human life. There's none of us who have a lack of experience. Okay? So at some point, these two things may converge. We have our bad experience and we become a little receptive to hearing. And the two converge. The experience alone usually doesn't do it. We get burned and then we go back and get burned again. But if by getting burned we think I'm just getting burned and what to do, and then we hear, is there anything we can do about this? The feedback? You're working on it, okay. I see. Where's the speaker?
Yeah,
Oh, I see.
it's one of the Harinam speakers.
Hmm?
We take the speaker out on Harinam.
I see. Is there a way to move it further away so that
We can try. The cable's only so long.
usually feedback comes from being too close to the microphone?
Turn the volume down a little.
They want it louder at the back.
They want volume,
Yeah.
so try moving it further away.
Okay,
See
let's
what that
move it.
does.
That's
Can you move the microphone a little bit further?
it. No. It's okay.
Yeah, hang on.
Thank-
How much to do? Oh, sorry. So Marge, I'll just can reroute the mic lead. Just, yeah. There we go.
And maybe, yeah, seems better. Okay. And where were we? Did we answer that, or did we still have a?
I think we have.
Okay, I got it. Yes. Or,
Sorry, Marge, before I interrupt. If anyone has any pieces of paper they want to ask questions about this,
send your papers up, you know, taking the paper route.
if you'd like to, otherwise you just put your hand up. But I've got one question here, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
How do we learn to see Krishna everywhere and experience his presence day to day?
How do you learn to see Krishna everywhere and
Experience his presence day to day.
experience his presence day to day? Seeing begins by hearing. Seeing begins by hearing. Everybody wants to see, but hearing is more important. So by hearing Krishna, you'll see Krishna. One thing is that hearing gives you knowledge. If the King of England were to walk in the room, I wouldn't see him for lack of knowledge. To me, he would just be another elderly gentleman. But if someone tells me, this is the King of England and Prince Charles, then, oh, Your Majesty, I see through the ears. more effectively than through the eyes. So if we hear, like Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Rasoham Apsukamte, Krishna says, I'm the taste of the water. But we all taste water. But if we hear from Krishna that taste is Krishna, then we start to think, how is that? Krishna says, I'm the light of the sun and the moon. We all see the sunlight, we all see the moonlight. But after hearing from Krishna, we start to think, how is it that Krishna is the light of the sun, the light of the moon? Krishna says, I'm in everyone's heart. And so we don't, microscopic vision, but we start to think, how is it that Krishna is in everyone's heart? So by hearing, we start to see. Yes. Hare Krishna.
This is kind of a follow-up to what Yami started. What do you say about someone who doesn't learn from
A
experience?
little louder if you could.
What do you say about someone who doesn't learn from experience?
What do you say about someone who doesn't learn from experience?
Yeah, like they'll keep doing the same thing.
Hmm?
They'll keep doing the same thing
They'll keep doing the same thing. Well, what can you say? He's unfortunate. It said the first-class person learns by hearing, the second-class person by experience, and the third person, not at all. But the person, still, if a person who doesn't learn from experience, but he's fortunate enough to hear, it can change. We've seen that practically. By hearing the message of Krishna is very powerful. And people who've had so much bad experience but don't know what to make of it can get the clue from hearing. Thank you. Yes, I'm back.
So I've only recently started like paying attention towards religion, and I was reading the Bhagavad Gita, and in the 5th verse of the 15th chapter, he talks about like achieving like the eternal, and he kind of says the only way to do that is by like freeing yourself from like pairs of opposites, like pleasure and pain and things like that. But like as someone who's not really been religious, and doesn't really have that kind of like religion around him, I find that I'm kind of like constantly like attracted to those kind of things. So how would you recommend like kind of like abstaining from like these sort of situations?
You've grown up in a background where religion is not the thing for you, but you've become interested in these topics. And you read in the 15th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, in the 5th chapter, rather in the 15th chapter, in the 5th verse, and then the question is, without having a religious background, how do you make something of that? You find it difficult to get free from these opposites like pleasure and pain and so on. Yeah? First thing is that this is not really a religious, what should we say? It doesn't require to be cast in a religious framework to be understood. It's not that if you're religious, then this will click for you, and if you're not religious, well, get religious, otherwise you're not going to understand this. It's a method it involves self-purification. Let's start at the beginning of the verse. Nirmana moha chitasanga dosha. Nirmana, moha means illusion. And mana means pride. So if one wants to make spiritual progress, one should try to free oneself from false pride. I am the greatest, I know what I'm doing, I'm on top of everything, these idiots, mana. I've got money, I've got good looks, I'm smart, I'm this, I'm that. And this is moha, illusion. I'm a poor slob trying to find my way through this, the thicket of the world. And I'm thinking I'm really hot stuff. So any spiritual culture will recommend humility. And the Bhagavad Gita says there's a list of items of knowledge, or items for the cultivation of knowledge. And the first one is humility. A humble person can get knowledge. A person who's a know-it-all, or who thinks he's really great, can't learn anything. At least on the spiritual path, it'll be very difficult. So nirvana moha and jita sangha dosha, who gets freed from entanglement in the lower qualities of material life. That means there must be some process to purify the heart. The yogis are undergoing meditation for that. The jnanis are undergoing philosophical research for that. And the devotees are taking up the path of divine service for that. The path of service is easier. This chanting is easier, especially in the present age. In previous ages, they could undergo enormous austerities, but not now. So this chanting purifies the heart of so many unwanted things that lodge there. Jita sangha dosha, adhyatma nitya vinivritta kama. Adhyatma nitya, to recognize the importance of spiritual realization. I don't have to come from a Catholic background or an Anglican background or a Jewish background or a Muslim background. I just have to see that spiritual realization is important. Adhyatma and vinivritta kama, and getting free from so many desires. That may sometimes seem hard, but if we're making spiritual progress, we'll see. I want this, I want that, I want this, I want that, and if I get this, I get that. It doesn't make a difference. I don't become happy because I got a Ferrari or whatever it is. So vinivritta kama, one gets free from so many needless wants. And dvanvaya vimukta sukha dukkha sangyaya. Dvanvaya vimukta, and one who's freed from, that comes to your question, these dualities, these opposites. In the material world, the material life, we're always trying to get happiness and avoid distress. So we're trying to change the balance, essentially. I'm getting like 80% distress. If I could bring it down to 60, 60-40 would be good. If I could bring it down to 40, have 60 on the pleasure side, now that would really be good. So I'm trying to adjust sukha and dukkha, happiness and distress, and bring up one and snuff out the other. But Krishna says, just come to the transcendental platform where this happiness and distress don't matter. Don't matter. Why don't they matter? Because they pertain to this body. And they come and go. I was on the flight from Istanbul yesterday. There were some children, and as soon as the plane took off, they were screaming. And, they were in distress. And then 15 minutes later, they quieted down, and they weren't in distress anymore. And then they were, I guess, playing with bears or something, so they were happy. And, as in the course of the day, I'm sure it's happiness and distress. And, what does it mean? It's like being in happiness and distress in a dream. I had a weird dream when I arrived. I was resting and I dreamed I was missing my flight, my connecting flight. I would tell you the details, who's far after. But in fact, it wasn't when I arrived. I was on the flight and dreaming that I was missing it. And I woke up and it was like, it was really funny. But when I was in the dream, it was like, oh my goodness, what are you on? And wherever I was in this strange place, and no one spoke anything but French. And I don't know French, so anyway, it was quite distressing. And then you wake up and it had no meaning. It had no meaning. I'm being eaten by a tiger, or they crowned me king of France. Either way, it doesn't mean anything, because when I wake up, it's going to be, what was that all about? So, of course, this is Gaschantya Muta Padamabhiyanta. The verse ends by saying that a person who achieves this state attains the supreme destination. So this is not day 1, day 2, or day 5, but this is the level to which one can come by Krishna consciousness. And he becomes, he sees beyond happiness and distress. It's not that he doesn't know that now I've got a headache, or now whatever. But he just sees it comes, it goes. Let me tolerate it. Is that okay? Yeah, you choose. I make too many choices.
I guess the question is, when was the last time you remember feeling anger or frustration?
This morning.
So what made you feel it specifically, and why did you react the way you did?
What gets me angry, or so many stupid things, my goodness. Sometimes I become angry at myself for being such a jerk. Sometimes I become angry at others for being such jerks. There's so many things that when things basically don't go our way, they go the other way, and we become angry. One has to just, all right, this anger is there, but let me not follow it. And when it came, it'll go. Is that okay?
Yeah, exactly that. Like,
How do you deal with it?
how do you contain it into this box and then let
I'll
it
tell
go?
you that this is sort of a funny story I heard from one of my godmothers, Bhakti Swami. There was a ceremony, and Srila Prabhupada was installing a deity in a major temple, and the devotees who were in charge were messing everything up, doing it wrong. And Prabhupada was becoming angry at them and expressing it, That's one of the duties of the spiritual master, is to correct the disciple. And Prabhupada was becoming angry. And there was this sort of hippie kid who'd been coming to the temple, and when he would get a little obnoxious, the devotees would tell him, why don't you just chant Hare Krishna? And so Prabhupada was becoming angrier and angrier. And the hippie kid said to Prabhupada, why don't you just chant Hare Krishna? So Prabhupada picked up his bead bag and That's our simple formula for everything. When we become angry or frustrated or full of longings or regrets or confusion, or just take shelter of this transcendental sound. Yes.
Hi Krishna. Could you tell us a little bit about how was it like spending time with Prabhupada?
How was it like
Being with
spending
him?
time through the Prabhupada, being with him? It's a little hard to tell you. There were some children. There's a fruit you get in India called jackfruit. Some of you have tasted jackfruit. And sometimes it's a vegetable, sometimes it's a fruit, depending on what stage it's in. And his grandchildren were asking, "What's jackfruit like? What's jackfruit taste? What's it like to have jackfruit?" He said, "Well, I can't tell you. You have to taste it." "No, tell us. Finally, he said, "Well, it's a little bit like having sugarcane juice strained through a Muslim's beard." It means I can't tell you. So I know that doesn't help. Let me say more, perhaps helpfully, that you can have whatever experience I was able to get, you're able to get today. It's not that, Prabhupada came, Prabhupada left, and, you missed the whole thing, and tough luck for you. You just can hear from those who were there. But it's going on. What people got from Srila Prabhupada, you can get from them. And not just by their telling you, well, here's what it was like, on a scale of 0 to 10 was but you can experience for yourself the same things that Srila Prabhupada talks about, the same experiences are still open today. Prabhupada's followers are there, followers of the followers are there. So you'll have your own transcendental experiences by practicing Krishna consciousness, by associating with devotees. And then I don't have to tell you, well, here's what it was like, it felt kind of like this, and you'll experience it. Pratyakshavagamam dharma. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, this yoga is directly experienced. Susukam kartam, and it's joyfully performed. So it's not that I'll report to you what it was like. You'll experience it yourself. Mm-hmm. Yes.
I'm quite new to the whole Hare Krishna movement, but my understanding is that there are two notions that separates it from other religions. The first is that God is one and the same. So Jesus and Allah, they're both Krishna, so they're different manifestations of the same God. And the second notion is that God lives within all of us. So we're all, in a sense, divine beings. And the key is to remember our divine nature. And that is something we don't see, I would say, in Christianity, that emphasizes the believers as sinners, separate from God. And so my question is, how can...
Let me summarize what you said so far before I lose it. She's new, but she has seen something that separates Krishna consciousness or distinguishes Krishna consciousness from other religions. Two things. One is that there's a oneness to God's nature, that there's no difference between Krishna and Allah and Jesus and so on. And the second one is that God is within everyone's heart. And so in that sense, no one's separated from God.
And not just God lives within us, but we're also divine.
And we also have a divine nature. Okay. And then
my question is, how can people understand these two?
How can people understand these two
lives?
ideas? How can people understand it? Well, there are different ways. Of course, our books are there, and by reading the books, one can start to pick up the ideas one after another. But the books are not just working in isolation, they're part of a process. Well, something like going to school, there's textbooks, but when you sit in the class and there's interactions with the teacher and so on, books are, what's written in the book comes alive. So there's a process here that goes with the philosophy, especially the chanting. Chanting purifies the heart and allows us to see our own nature, our own divine nature, the nature of God, the nature of our relationship with God. The chanting especially helps us. And then rendering of service. There are different ways of serving Krishna. Hearing about Krishna is a kind of service to Krishna. Chanting is another kind of service. And remembering Krishna, thinking about Krishna is another kind of service. Or doing things for Krishna. Someone's helping clean up this room after the program's over. Or somebody's helping the live streaming or photography, videography. That's service. So by serving Krishna, we also advance in understanding Krishna. Or from another angle of vision, by serving Krishna, we please Krishna, and Krishna reveals to us what is what. It's not just by our own effort, but Krishna helps us. Tadami buddhi yoga, the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, one who's always serving me with devotion, I illuminate the paths, I disclose to him everything he needs to know. Is that okay? You can ask more.
Just, I guess a question with chanting. I feel like a lot of people who might not have come from a religious background might feel quite opposed to chanting because of the rigidity often associated with religion. A lot of people tend to shy away from any religious connotation because of the way religions are constructed and maintained nowadays.
Your religion is not sort of a winning number these days. So people might shy away from chanting because it seems like it's religious.
It's just that if we look at the world today, a lot of people do destructive things in the name of religion.
A lot of destructive behavior goes on in the name of religion, and a lot of destructive behavior goes on that has nothing to do with religion.
Exactly.
For both things.
Exactly. So for me, I differentiate spirituality from religion.
Yeah. Prabhupada made that distinction too, before they started taking polls that showed that so many people were spiritual but not religious. Srila Prabhupada presented Krishna consciousness not as a religion but as a science of God, a science of spiritual understanding. And so what does that mean? Is that just like marketing or packaging or what is that? One of my godbrothers wrote an article for a magazine called Krishna Consciousness, the religion that no one can join. The religion that no one can join. What did he mean by that? He explained that, usually we think of religion as something you adopt. A Christian becomes a Jew becomes a Muslim becomes a Jain becomes a Buddhist, whatever it is, you develop a particular faith, and we can adopt whichever one and become convinced of this religion or that religion. So in that sense, these religions are temporary, or my faith in a particular religion is temporary. But Krishna consciousness is what's called in Sanskrit Sanatana Dharma. Dharma means like the intrinsic quality of something, like sugar. It's always going to be sweet. It's not that you have to do something to sugar to persuade it to be sweet or make it sweet. It's sweet. Chili's going to be hot because that's its nature. Mhm. So what is the nature of a living being? Is it that I have a Christian nature or a Jewish nature or a Hindu nature? I have to find out what my nature is. Is it that I have a Buddhist nature? The nature of the living being is service. Every living being serves. I serve my country, I serve my family, I serve my boss, I serve my friends, I serve my dog. People are walking the dog and rendering service to the dog. The politicians try to persuade us that they're serving the people. The shopkeepers are serving the customers. And everybody's serving. If I'm not serving anywhere else, I'm serving my senses. Tongue says, I want to taste this. Yes, sir, yes, sir. I go chasing it. I'll get it for you, I'll get it for you. We're all serving. So the religion of the living being is service. Whether it's expressed this way or that way or the other way, it's service. It's built in, as heat is built into the chili, or sugar is built into the sugar. But the service that we render to our boss or our country or our customers is temporary service. But the eternal service is service to the Supreme. And for that, you don't have to switch from this religion or that religion. It's the nature of the living being to serve, and the highest nature of the living being to serve the Supreme. So our job is not to persuade you, you've missed the thread, you're an Anglican and you really ought to be a Hindu. So let's move over here. We don't really care what religion a person belongs to, this religion or that religion, but our purpose is to enable people to revive their eternal relationship with God. Is that okay? In the Bhagavatam, in our principal book, it says, Savayapam Sampravodharmo Yato Bhakti Yadokshaja Ohetu Kipatiyatas Yatma Suprasidati. What's the highest Dharma? Dharma is sometimes translated as duty, sometimes occupation, sometimes religion, sometimes engagement. Business, what's the highest business for ourselves? But the Bhagavatam doesn't say the highest Dharma is Hindu Dharma or Christian Dharma or Muslim Dharma. That engagement or Dharma is best, by which you develop your inherent love for God. That's the best.
So I guess my last question is, how can the process of chanting allow one to realize spirituality that is beyond religion? Because chanting can be mechanical to someone who doesn't understand it.
So how does the chanting enable one to realize spirituality? Because chanting can be mechanical. In one sense, where chanting is just like this little piece of flesh is moving up and down, and something's coming out of a voice box. It's just a material thing. But the spiritual truth can appear within matter. The spiritual truth can appear within matter, because matter is really part of God's energy. So even with our material voices, our material bodies, our material minds, we can have spiritual realization. Now, it's said that the chanting itself comes from the spiritual platform. It's not that it's like a mechanical thing, you know, like you say, okay, we're going to make a 12-story building, and we start bringing the stuff on site, and we construct the building, and okay, here it is. It's not that we sort of build up, but it's a descending process. That the chanting is a call to Krishna. Please engage me in your service. Now I'm engaged in the service of my customers, my constituents, my friends, my this, my that, my senses. Please engage me in your service so that I'll be perfectly happy. And then Krishna responds, yes. So it's not, in that sense, it's not a mechanic. It's not that if you chant 14,325.5 times in a day, you will achieve this result. But it's your sincerity of heart, your desire to make spiritual progress, that Krishna, sitting within your heart, sees and says, let me help her out. She's looking for me. Yes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I want to ask you, what convinces you of the idea of Bhagwan as opposed to...
What convinces me of the idea of Bhagavan?
Yeah, as opposed to more of the, Mayavadi philosophy of an impersonal supreme.
What convinces me more of the personal aspect of God as distinct from the impersonal? Well, I think the killer argument is this one. There's, there are various things that might be persuasive, but I find this one just a killer argument. That the world is full of varieties. You've got here a purple, a maroon, section of the wall. We've got a mauve upper section. We've got white going here, and we've got all these lights. And we've got a whole room of people from different backgrounds and different countries and with different natures and different clothing and different. And the world is full of, different countries, and there's the land, and there's the water, and there's the mountains, and there's the sea. There's so many varieties. The world is just teeming with variety. And if you take the point of view that the ultimate source of everything has no form, no qualities, it's beyond shape, it's beyond location, it's beyond. It's all absolutely one. Within that absolute, there's no variety. If you take that profound, deep, impersonal view, now all you have to do is explain to me where the varieties have come from. Since the ultimate source of everything has no form, no qualities, no variety, because that would mean duality. It has no specific attributes. It's all like one great homogeneous soup. Where the varieties have come from. That's the problem with the impersonal viewpoint. And I, to this day, I've been around 50 some odd years in this game. No one's come up with a satisfactory answer. And if you say, on the other hand, well, the varieties come from a person who has limitless attributes, limitless qualities, It's not that he's limited because he's got a form. His form has unlimited capability, unlimited attributes. But he's a person. You know, I'm a small little person who can do this and that and the other thing. And he's the ultimate person. There's no limit to what he can do, or to the energies he has. So he can create yellow, he can create white, he can create mauve, he can create maroon. All varieties are found within him. He's the reservoir of limitless varieties. And that works. That works.
I also had a second question. So what convinces you of some of the pastimes of Krishna that seem more, I guess, miraculous?
What convinces me of the pastimes of Krishna, some of which appear quite miraculous. Miraculous just means we don't know how to do it. You get this little creature with a beak and a couple of wings, and all of a sudden it just flies up into the sky. I can't do that. But the birds do it all the time. The trees eat with their feet. The one example is given that there was a Brahmin and a cobbler. And Nard was traveling, Nard Muni, a sage, was traveling to the abode of Narayan, form of Krishna. And on the way he met the Brahmin. And the pious Brahmin asked Narada where he was going. I'm going to meet Narayan. Please ask him when I'll attain liberation. Okay. And Narada Muni later met a cobbler, a shoemaker, sitting under a tree making shoes. Asked the same question. When will I attain liberation? So Narada went, he met Narayan, and there was some discussion, but he brought up the question, I met a cobbler, I met a Brahmin, can you tell me when they'll be liberated? Narada said, yes, the cobbler will obtain liberation in this lifetime. And the Brahmin, it will be quite a number of births. And Narada was surprised, you know, this pious Brahmin has to wait for births and births, and this shoemaker dealing with skins and hides is going to be liberated in this lifetime. Oh, Narayan told him that, okay, you're wondering about this. When they ask you what I was doing, tell them that I was pulling an elephant through the eye of a needle, this way and that way. So Narada Muni went back. He met the Brahmin. Did you meet Narayan? Yes. Did you ask when I'd be liberated? Yes. And he said after many, many births. And the Brahmin was disappointed. But he asked, what was Narayan doing? Narayan said, well, he was pulling an elephant through the eye of a needle, this way and that way. Well, Nard, you're always telling stories. And Nard proceeded and met the cobbler. Yes, Narayan said that you'll be liberated in this lifetime. The cobbler said, oh, the Lord is so kind. And what was he doing? Pulling an elephant is so wonderful. You believe it? Yeah, why not? And then the cobbler gave evidence. I'm sitting here making shoes under a banyan tree. In England, we don't have banyan trees, but an enormous tree. So the cobbler said that I'm sitting under this banyan tree, and the tree has so many seeds. And in each seed, there's another tree. And in each tree, there's so many seeds. So if Narayana, Krishna, we can put these enormous trees into a little seed like that, what's so hard about pulling an elephant through the eye of a needle? So he had that, he wasn't just a fool, he had a reason, a good reason for his understanding. What's impossible for us may be easy for others. And what's impossible for them, everything is easy for Krishna. And fun also. Krishna invents these wonderful activities, in one sense just to attract us, just to give pleasure to his devotees and to attract us. And Krishna performs so many wonderful activities, stealing butter, playing with monkeys, so many things. We can look and say, oh, this is all mythology. But great sages have taken interest in these activities and commented and written books and books about these activities. Are they fools? But they're just reading these children's stories and mythology and buying it. And then they have a deeper understanding.
Thank you so much for all your questions so far. Someone has asked, how can you practice detachment in a healthy way?
How can you practice detachment in a healthy way? Become attached to Krishna. If you just try to detach yourself from material things or material activities, make sure they get some prasadam, please. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.
And they'll give you a little prasadam, some refreshment before you go. Clue me back in.
How can we just
Detachment. So we become attached to Krishna. Just like if I have a little biscuit, that's all I have. Go ahead and try and detach me from my biscuit. That's breakfast and lunch. I'm not going to give it up. But if you come with a big tray full of, sweet rice and gulab jamuns and scones and rice and so many things, it's easy. I'll forget all about that 2-week-old biscuit. Raso varjam sopyasya. I've got something better. I naturally give up the lesser drink. If I don't have anything better, how can I give up? But if I have something better, then just like there's so many nasty things to eat. Things that are just made in factories and things that are unhealthy and bad karma and so on. But if you tell me to give it up, well, what am I going to eat? But if you give me something better to eat,
Okay, someone has asked a couple of questions. I'll ask the first one first. How to understand the purpose of life?
How to understand the purpose of life? Chant Hare Krishna. read our books, associate with the devotees. Again, it's a process. There's a process. It's not just like wait for the lightning bolt to hit. There's a process that will enable us to reach that.
And the same person has asked, how to empower others when you yourself are struggling to cope with the setback?
How to empower others when you yourself are struggling with setbacks. Empower others. Well, obviously we're not going to give people what we don't have. Whatever you have, give to others, despite the difficulty. If you have £100 to give 100. If you have 20, give 20. Whatever you have, give. Something else. Mm-hmm.
Keen to understand your perspective on climate change and environmentalism.
Perspective on climate change and environmentalism. In one sense, well, there's a lot that can be said from different angles of vision about climate change and environmentalism. People are clamoring for saving the environment at the same time that they want to eat meat. They're at cross purposes with themselves. This meat-eating business is hugely destructive. Or they want to have a civilization full of unnecessary necessities, and they want to have a save the environment. So again, they're cross purposes with one another. So Krishna consciousness involves adopting a simpler way of life in which one is satisfied by inner understanding, by spiritual realization, that it doesn't need a humbug civilization, an overbuilt civilization for happiness. Just learn the art of being satisfied with what comes of its own accord. And then you can have a better environment and deal with climate change and so on. So that's one answer. Another answer is the hell with all of that. Just leave the environment. The material world is a foreign environment because we're not material. Within the body, the material body, the temporary body, the body that has no independent consciousness of its own, within that body is the Atma, the spark of consciousness. That spark of consciousness has nothing to do with the material world. It's in a foreign place when it's here, a foreign environment. And by Krishna consciousness, you can get out of that dark place and attain the real environment where everything's eternal, where everything is full of consciousness, where everything is blissful. That environment doesn't have a climate change problem, air pollution problem, running out of petroleum problem. None of those problems. So from that point of view, the solution to the environmental crisis, the climate change, is to get out of the material world entirely. Instead, if we devote ourselves to saving the earth, and we're distracting ourselves from the real purpose of life. It's Maya's trick. You don't want to get out of the material world. You want to have a cleaner environment. It's a trick of Maya, the illusory energy. Yes?
When you joined the movement, you were quite young.
Loud.
When you joined the movement, you were quite young. So I was just curious to know if you had any unfulfilled material desires, and if so, what did you do about them?
do I have any unfulfilled material desires? I had some, my 18-year-old material desires, I had so many of them that were unfulfilled. Thank you, Krishna. If they'd all been fulfilled, I'd be in such a pickle. Such a mess, you know. It's not that when all my desires are fulfilled, then it's Krishna's mercy that so many desires. And then you say that I was such a fool, I was desiring this, I was desiring that. What an idiot I was. Is that okay? It's the psychologists tell us, or that our mind tells us, that our business is to satisfy our desires, and if somehow these desires are not satisfied, I'm going to be miserable, I'm going to be frustrated, I'm going to be all messed up inside because I'll have all this pent-up desire that's not satisfied, blah, 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 blah. And the way the world works is my desires will never be satisfied. That's, you know, the millionaires are not satisfied. The man who has 4 wives wants 8 and 2 mistresses on the side. We're never satisfied. So it's not, what is that? Sashantim apnoti nakamakami in Bhagavad Gita. Puryamanam achala pratishta. Krishna says that the materialistic person is always pursuing desires, trying to satisfy his desires. But the thoughtful person, the self-realized person, he has all these desires that are coming like waves of the ocean, where they're coming like rivers flowing into the ocean. But the ocean is not disturbed. The ocean stays the same. And however many rivers flow into it, the ocean stays the same. So the self-realized person is like that. He's not, oh, this desire, that desire. He just remains peaceful. All right, this desire, that desire. Not very important business. Sashantim apnoti, that person attains peace. Not the person who's chasing desires. And that's Kohelet also, he has that experience. He tries it on grand, he was a king. He was a great king. He had practically limitless wealth. Whatever he desired, let me have it. And at the end, what's the use of all this? It doesn't lead to happiness. No, one doesn't attain peace even by that method. But if one just remains, what's the word? Unaffected, if one doesn't go chasing after these desires, only whatever comes on its own, he becomes peaceful. And a peaceful person can be happy. So Prabhupada said, chant Hare Krishna and be happy.
Raj, maybe we have one final question.
One final question.
We can
Is it one of these, or you've done this? Or is it a hand question?
I think we should go for a hand question.
We'll take a hand question. Okay, you didn't ask your question, I think.
In a society where most people are expected to conform to social norms.
In a society where most people are expected to conform to social norms.
Do you have any recommendations for someone who wants to live a different life but find it quite difficult?
Any recommendations for people who want to live a spiritual life but find it very difficult? Yeah. That we can, what's the word, go along with so many social norms without commitment in one sense. But all right, I'll dress in a suit and tie, or I'll do whatever it is that's normal. But that's not my real life. Now, not that I'll do anything and everything because it's a social norm, not that if in my circle everybody's drinking beer, that I have to drink beer. If they're all shooting heroin, I have to shoot heroin. But in terms of what we might call the usual social expectations, you know, all right, let me go along with that. But let me change, like working. You're working, they expect you there at 9 in the morning. They expect you to smile at all the customers. They expect you to be polite. They expect you to work harder than what they're paying you warrants. So you do those things, but your mind is on Krishna. Your consciousness is not ultimately devoted to how am I going to get money so that I can get this, so that I can get that, so that I can be happy. Your mind is on how do I make spiritual progress? How do I increase my Krishna consciousness? And Prabhupada gave an example, it's not his example, it comes from previous teachers, that there's a woman who's married and she's got a lover on the side. And because she has a lover on the side, she doesn't want her husband to know. So she's an ideal housewife. You know, she's cleaning and she's, you know, she's the perfect housewife, so diligently doing everything that an ideal wife would do. But in her heart, she's not thinking of her husband, she's thinking of her lover. When will we meet? Is he thinking of me? What is he doing? On and on and on, thinking of her lover. So if lover consciousness, why not Krishna consciousness? We can go on with our duties, the things that we have to do or we're sometimes expected to do. But our consciousness can be focused on spiritual realization and Krishna consciousness. Does that answer your question? Okay, thank you. And they told me that was the last question, so I guess it is.
I'm so sorry to cut this amazing event. Can we have a loud Haribol for His Holiness Jayadvaita Maharaj? Haribol! Thank you all so much for coming to our event. I'm sure that you've all really, really enjoyed it. I know I took a lot of deep spiritual realizations from this beautiful question and answers. We had another small token for Maharaj, which Yama is going to give.
Well, thank you very much.
I hope you appreciate our appreciation and our offering.
Thank you.
I think we're going to...
You're almost done, but we have to tell people that this book is there. An award-winning book, a life-changing book.
Yama can be the spokesperson, yeah.
And I don't know what they're going for, but I'm sure it's not extraordinary. And if you want, I'll sign it, and then you can get more for it on eBay. And thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
So, like Maharaj mentioned, we have the books here for you. So anybody who wants to take them, we'll have a card reader at the back of the room who just take them.